My first year at IO, I'll be honest, I thought it was fucking John Belushi. I did. And then I got called out. And that sucked when I got called out on it. I try so hard to be original. I think everyone tries to do their own thing. So that's where I come up with the title, Originalis Perhaps Instinct. I mean, with improv, it's just like that, within an instinct. You know what you're gonna do.
It's a consensus that Chicago is sort of like an improv hub to North America. Maybe one of the hubs around the world.
No further ado, ladies and gents, I give you the Midnight Reckoning.
There's far more improv here than anywhere else. New York is greatly expanded, LA is greatly expanded, and that makes me grateful because I can go to New York and LA and improvise anytime I fucking want, I hope, please invite me. But Chicago has solid, strong institutions that are devoted to the art of improvisation as an art form. So I think that people come here because they know that when they come here, they don't have to be sidetracked by product. They can just enjoy the process and understand this is school. This is learning time. It's all good. Straight up and down. Look how nice that looks. Isn't that nice when he's nice and open as well? Take your time, but pull up your volume. Lower that. Oh.
People have become more aware of improv, and then they read about it and they learn that there are tangible steps to go through as a comedic actor in Chicago in order to attain a higher television or film goal. And I think that that's a lot of motivation for people to move here and study because it seems a little more tangible. It removes the pipe dream a little bit and actually creates steps that you can go through in order to achieve something greater for yourself.
The day I moved here, I signed up for all 3 training centers. Back in the day, they used to say that you weren't really a fully well-rounded improviser unless you had studied at all 3 places. So I immediately started in all 3 places, and my brain exploded, and I loved it. And I had the same teachers at the Annoyance that I had at the Second City, and some from the Second City at IO, and all of them taught different things in all 3 places.
Now we have a training center, which is a whole money stream, truthfully, for Second City, and they have over 1,200 students in the classes. So you want to know why there's so much improv, because we created a monster. If we're training 1,200 kids every 5 weeks, you can imagine how many improvisers there are running around this city.
I'd say about 800 students a semester because we have 6 levels. We have about 4 classes in each level with about 18 people in each class, so you'd have to do the math.
I would say at any time there are about 150 to 200 people in the Annoyances training program. And that's compared to, I think, 16 to 1,800 at any time in Second City's training program.
Charna is a living fountain of information. Mick Napier is truly, one of the enlightened improvisers. If you want to learn, you have to come here to learn from these people. That's why people come to Chicago.
My initial feelings towards improv when I started in Chicago, I can honestly say I didn't get it. I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I started to, it's kind of like, what's that ladder of learning? You're unconsciously unskilled, and then you're consciously unskilled, and then you're consciously skilled, and then you become unconsciously skilled, where you're doing things without knowing that you're doing them. Like when I first came out, I was clearly unconsciously unskilled. Like I didn't, and I think it took me a few years because I remember just sitting in classes and listening to like Peter Gwynn, people like that, and writing down every word that they would say in class. And then in bed at night, I would sit and study my notes and I would try to let it sink in and stuff. And I think for me, I don't know what that means, what kind of learner I am, if it's just tactile or if it's time or auditory, I don't know. But it took me a long time to actually get it, to get how it works. I was just trying to do what they were telling me for a long time. And I think it's like Susan Messing's thing of fake it till you make it. I just kept trying, and then one day I realized I wasn't trying. What was the original question?
You know, I can only go back to my experience. When I go back to what IO was in 1987 and Second City and everything else, I look around and see a huge majority of the people who studied not going into executive work, but actually continuing on in some way, shape, or form. Some people write for radio, some people do voiceovers, some people are mega stars, you know, whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of us just all over the place. And I look around, I'm like, oh, fuck, I know so many of them. So obviously a chunk of them continued on. Some of them just used it to become better public speakers or more comfortable in their own skin. It wasn't just for product. I don't think people started improvising then so they would be on SNL. I think people started improvising because they thought it was a beautiful art. And they're right. I mean, what you get out of it, the ramifications of good work, or somebody's going to notice you. So in terms of now, anybody who comes into this and starts worrying about where it's going to take them, I would strongly suggest put your blinders on here and here and let your path be your path.
I would like to give you half of my tuna fish sandwich, although you are allergic to peanut butter.
Uh-huh. I got some alfalfa on whole wheat with a little couscous and some hummus.
You dyke balls trading grub? You know what helps? Ask your mom for what you want for lunch.
Principal Jackson is such a douche.
Improv to me is not really an art form. Improv is a thing that one does to achieve a piece of art, perhaps. Other than that, it's a process, and sometimes that process is put on stage, and that's awesome, and it can be very funny. An art form to me is a declaration of singular vision that then is upheld as best it can be. You know, I want to paint a painting about this, and I do that. I want to create a show about this, and I do that. I want to create a film, and I do that. Improvisation is so volatile and fluid that it's a concept and maybe a learning tool and a writing tool, but I have a difficult time seeing it as an art form. But so many people would disagree with me. And it may be that I don't take it that seriously either.
I work for IO. Improv is an art form.
Improv is merely a technique to develop material. That's all it is.
Improvisation is the least important thing you'll probably ever do in your life. And I'm also kind of cynical about it because for 20 years, I've seen people in Chicago talk about improvisation as an art form, talk about its virtues as an art form. And then as soon as they move to like Los Angeles or something, or they're on a TV show, suddenly they don't talk about this important art form anymore because no one really gives a fuck once you get to that point.
Nothing but buckwheat and M&M peanuts, that's what I eat.
Anyway, are you still gonna come over to my house for my slumber party?
Yeah, I'll pop by. Bring our swimsuits?
Principal Jackson, after what happened last summer, I don't know if Mom wants you back at the pool.
Last summer was the second greatest day of my life.
It's most easily described in my head as Improv Olympic teaches you how to make fire. The Annoyance teaches you how to put it in a flamethrower. And then Second City teaches you where you should be pointing it. And so that IO feels like the thing you would need to know to have the strongest base of how to go about all the other stuff.
You know, when you improvise, the more you get to work in front of an audience, the better you are. That learning how to deal with an audience is really important. And kids who work at IO have an edge because they have experience. So it's great.
You'll find that 90% of the people on Second City stage are hired from our training center. And our teachers also teach at the Annoyance. We all help each other out.
Let's see, I created this place about 25 years ago. Before that, for about 2 years, I was a student. I took a class at Players Workshop of Second City, which was run by somebody totally different than it's being run by now. And it was with Joe Forsberg, and then I studied with Paul Sills for a year. And it was then that I was doing improvisation with a group called Standard Deviation. And at that time, if you weren't one of the 6 people on Second City's main stage, you weren't doing it anywhere live because there was no Improv Olympic, there was no playground, there was no, comedy sports. So, I had this idea, like, what if I had my own little game theater so I could work all the time and perform all the time? And so it was born purely out of selfish reasons, and then got sick of it, got sick of the games, and that's when I met Del Close and asked him if there was something more for improvisation, and that's when we decided to work together and create long-form improvisation, thus changing the face of improvisational comedy forever.
There were 3 levels. Charna, which is improv from basics to the Herald. And then there was this sort of experimental second class with Mick Napier and John Harazal. That was like a one-time thing, just like sort of scene-y kind of undefined thing. And then Del's class was more like a lab. He would just have some idea about something and apply it to improv, and he would work with it for a while. So they would just come in and say, I've been reading the horror comics, and I want to improvise the scene, the frames with no words in them, see what they look like, or what's it like to improvise italics or something like that. Or he had read about something in neuroscience that he wanted us to deal with, and it could be from any part of life. It wasn't necessarily from the arts. So it was always very experimental and cool in that way.
I did know Del Close. I knew him as a teacher, I knew him as a director, and I knew him as a friend as much as anyone could be a friend with him. He cracked me up. He's a very, very funny man. His class was interesting in that he told a lot of stories. I can't remember anything I've learned from Del Close, but I certainly enjoyed listening to his stories and all of that.
Del was getting older and sicker when I first got into class with him, and he was talking a lot in class. He'd talk and talk and talk, and a lot of people were frustrated about not getting stage time, but I was thrilled to just hear him talk. Del was kind of cut and dried too. Like, if you liked a performer, he'd sort of teach to them, and if you weren't hacking it in class, Del would. There are famous stories about Del making people cry and run out of class, or writing them checks for their tuition money and handing it back to them and making them leave. And he wasn't doing that so much. He was reinvested again by the point I had him, but he was old and he was sick. And
well, one time he ripped me a new asshole in class. I was very pleased with myself. I thought it was very clever. I was on stage with a much older woman, and she was doing this scene about teaching me the ways of the world or something, and I was this young, lovely little thing, and I was sewing as she was telling me this, and I said, I found you so utterly fascinating. I've sewed my fingers together. And Del was like, fuck you. He's like, you just took this beautiful scene and fucked it over with your clever joke.
I remember saying that I thought I would be good at long form. And he's like, well, why do you say that? And I said, well, because, I have an athletic upbringing. I played basketball. My dad played football for Notre Dame, and blah, 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 fucking blah, all American boy thing. And he just sat and we just smoked, and I talked for, 3 to 20 minutes, 5 minutes, and laid out my golden boy jock tail, and then there was like a silence, passed the joint around again. It was just silent. He's like, I showed John Belushi how to shoot up. And then he looked at me, like, and I'm just like, and it was like a really hip way to kind of just say, fuck you, asshole, you don't know nothing.
He was a genius, but he was a character. And Charna really helped him a great deal. She took him under her wing and gave him a purpose, and she was a big, big help to him. I know you wouldn't believe it, but he was dedicated to his mother and his aunt. Lived in Kansas, which is where he was from. And he used to come up here with fudge that they sent him and offer me some fudge. So he was just really a kid at heart.
He was like the most famous guy you'd never heard of, kind of thing, but that people really respected him within the extended, improv Second City community.
I was there also the day he died, but 2 days before he died, he said something along the lines of, I guess I'm supposed to pass the baton to you, or I guess I'm supposed to, encourage you to keep improv going and, give you my blessing, but I really don't give a shit about it. So I thought that was very fun and probably the greatest thing he could have said to me. Because he really did give a shit about it, but he knew that I would appreciate that.
How's your short story coming, honey?
I really thought that I had a writer in me.
Yeah?
But it's just so hard when you see it there on the screen, blinking and blinking.
You do have a writer in you. I have a lot of faith in you. Let me read what you've written so far. Okay. Okay. Ooh, that Martian was scary.
You're not just saying that, Dad. You're not just saying that.
Well, that's a good opening line. That gets you hooked right into it.
Okay.
You're in a science fiction story.
Good, okay.
When he came down to Earth, the whole Earth trembled. That sets up the stakes. That means that the whole Earth was scared of the Martian.
Humankind is in peril.
Billy had a puppy. It's a little out of left field.
It's a beagle, just like the one that I wanted this Christmas and last Christmas and the Christmas before.
Oh. So you're coming from life experience.
Yeah.
And boy, was that puppy
angry. Interesting. Well, I've read it a few times, and I have to tell you honestly, Marianne, it gets more and more interesting every time I read it. Well, needless to say, you're getting an A on this, but if you wouldn't mind, I have a couple of friends at Harper's. I would, thinking about maybe putting this in the mail.
Wow,
Well, this is quite an extraordinary story.
Thanks.
You don't mind if I put it in the Harper's magazine, do you?
No.
I'll be able to give you a shiny new quarter.
So, my rival author. You really think you can take me on, Tom Clancy? Do you think that this is true?
Mr. Clancy, you've grown soft in your old age. People want stories from the heart. I still have one.
Tom, you still up writing? I was just grabbing some cereal.
Yes, I'm writing. I should have gotten a studio apartment. Chaz! Chaz, will you do me a favor and will you read my manuscript?
Oh, I don't know nothing about
Read
writing.
it, please! Please, Chaz.
Chaz, you still roommates with that loser Clancy? What a fucking jerk off he is. I think he's sleeping. Oh, yes.
I'm eating the shit out of all of your cereal.
I feel like the best order for taking classes in Chicago is to do either Second City or the Improv Olympic, and then come to the Annoyance, and then go to the third one. The Annoyance is my favorite place to work because I really do get to do anything I fucking want. And that's pretty much the motto with the Annoyance, is you can say and do just about anything short of hurting someone. It used to be that a theater would have one show that they ran, but we ran several different shows, and that model, I think, was influenced by the Annoyance. My family thinks it's a little weird. I don't think my mom and dad really get what I'm doing. I have one sibling, my brother, and he's really supportive. When I directed my parents are from Kentucky, so when I was directing my first main stage Second City show, I called my mother and said, hey, guess what? I'm directing the Second City main stage for the first time. And she said, well, I just hope you get started doing something. So it's kind of the point of view of my parents. They don't understand really what I'm doing. I think they become a little more aware of it as time goes on. I was in my early 30s, I believe, when I started directing the main stage, and it was a very scary prospect, but very exciting. It was very strange for me because the first day of rehearsal, I was just watching them improvise in the middle of the day and thinking to myself, this is so bizarre that the entire Second City main stage is improvising right now, and I'm the only one in the audience, but I was the director. So it was just a bizarre thing.
All right, now what I want you to do is make a left at this light. Check your mirrors. Nice, nice.
Hey, there's Ryan, take his driver's
All right, now I want you to pull up to this intersection right here and stop right in the middle. Right in the middle of the street. In the middle of the fucking street. Do as I say, please. Okay. Now, should you have listened to me? Why did you stop?
Because you told me to, and then I thought if I do what you say and I do it correctly, then I'll get good reviews.
I like how you think. Pull over to that bank. Alright, now you stop right here, you keep the car running. Turn on your hazards. You don't move until I come back.
Big pile of money today there, Bert.
Yeah, that's great.
Here you go.
Thank you.
$4,272.52, Mr. Smith.
You can turn on the radio if you want.
Oh, that'd be great.
All right?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for my withdrawal of $4,226.27. I'm going to take this home now.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, that's a gun! That's a gun! Oh, yeah! Oh,
I'll be taking that and whatever you have behind your counter.
Well, we have oodles of money today and no Bert.
I only have $4,000, and you sound like my old driving instructor. Oh, shit!
Thank you. You know what? That's all I need for right now.
Oh, God!
My gun is on the ground. Oh, God! Twice on the gun. My broom.
Drive, motherfucker! Drive, motherfucker!
No, I only take orders from one person. I'm waiting for a friend thing.
Drive or shoot you in the head, motherfucker! I'll do it! I don't even know why I'm escaping! Drive!
Just as long as you're back before too long, I told you I'm waiting for a friend.
No, 10 and 2! 10 and 2!
Slower. Where are we going?
Take a ride up here and signal, bitch.
Okay.
Second City was begun as a place where we could do a little show and hang out at a coffee shop with our buddies.
Nobody even remembers this, but Second City was the first one to really cross the line and do theater that was avant-garde plays. We did Sue Story, we did Crab's Last Cape, we did Janae's The Maids. We did all of these shows at Playwrights at the Second City in this little 80-seat theater. And that was before we moved down here. See, nobody even knows that's in our history, but it was.
In the 1952-53 school year at the University of Chicago, I was, of course, 2 years old at the time. Paul Stills conducted a series of improv classes every Saturday afternoon for 5 hours, teaching us his mother's games in order to form an ensemble, which is what the improv games do, to start our own theater, which was called Playwrights Theater Club and which opened on June 23rd, 1953.
Sheldon will tell you what day it was. He remembers every day. He's always calling me to say happy anniversary for something or another.
Then in 55, David opened a Compass in the University of Chicago area. It moved to a stupid location on Devon and Broadway, and then went to St. Louis, and then in 1959, Second City opened, which will be 50 years old in December of '09.
And we got ready to open that place, and the men were tacking down the carpeting. We were still working. The bar was piled yay high with glasses. They were just putting everything away. And smoke started backing out. In those days, we served hamburgers. And they had forgot or hadn't connected the exhaust pipe yet. So all the smoke backed up, and the fire department came, and it was quite an evening. That was the first performance.
We had really good audiences from the beginning because it was known by the Compass audiences that we were really the same thing. And the Compass had built a following of sorts. And it started getting national interest.
Now, of course, we have great depth. You know, we have 3 touring companies, which I started, and it's never gotten beyond that.
There's Red Co, Green Co, Blue Co, and there's one more in case all 3 are booked and somebody else needs a show. First, Bernie and Joyce opened the Second City in Toronto, and then Detroit happened, Cleveland happened, and then Las Vegas. Detroit moved to a suburb. Las Vegas has its own training center now. LA has a training center. So it's grown into this mini empire gradually.
All the actors lived above the, what is now the Adobe Grill. So it was easy to get to work. All they had to do was show up.
A lot of people moved to Chicago to try and get into Second City. Now, of course, the field has expanded enormously in Chicago. There is a lot of opportunity for doing improv in front of audiences in Chicago. But the apex, I believe, still is to have done Second City.
It's okay, man. Calm down, calm down.
Relax, relax. Don't fail. Don't fail.
Relax, relax. You guys have got to work this out. I would like to get.
Don't say it.
Calm down! Calm down! Stop it! Relax! Stop it! Just knock it off!
In Chicago, you can improvise almost every night, but where are you doing it, why are you doing it, and what will it lead to? Yeah, you can be on 10 fucking teams that are all mediocre and they all perform all the time. But improvisers in the city are often seduced by the culture of Chicago improvisation. They feel as if they're on a team, then I must be doing okay, because you have your performance, then in the bar, you have 10 people reinforcing to each other that you're all where you should be. But time goes by, years can go by, and an individual sometimes in improvisation doesn't give enough credence to their career. So they're on teams, they're doing this, they're doing that, but they didn't get headshots, they didn't get an agent, and they keep waiting and waiting and waiting. And part of what they're waiting for maybe is to be on a house team at Improv Olympic or to be on the main stage. But as that time goes by, sometimes they neglect their own sense of why they came to this city.
I mean, I know some peeps that are all about it. Not just improv, but they perform stand-up, sketch, improv like 2 or 3 times, 4 times every single night. And to me, that they're networking, they're doing all this stuff. But I mean, to me, that would just wear me out, and I wouldn't want to do it anymore.
There's definitely a wear and tear that happens. So many shows a night, late nights, rehearsals. Things you have to sacrifice. Time with your family, time with your friends. Things you miss, events, birthdays, baptisms, first communions, all sorts of shit. So I think, it wears on you, but I don't think the enthusiasm ever really leaves, not once you hit the stage.
Once I realized that these people do it most nights of the week, I realized wow, no wonder I'm not seeing much progress in being a student. I'm doing this 1 night a week, so I'm getting better at a 1 night a week pace. So then I started being like, how can I do this 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week?
Because they did eat, sleep, drink, and shit improv, they got to be the best. I think, if you come once when you're performing and you go to your class and you don't really care that much, you're just going to be one of those people that kind of falls by the wayside.
A friend of mine told me that he took French for 1 class a day, through high school and college, but his wife took French immersion. So she took her math and history and everything in French, and to this day she can speak it and dream in it and think in French and everything, and he can say 6 phrases. I sort of think I went the immersion route, and maybe that's why I just through sheer force of will got to be a decent player.
By the same token, I worry about the people who do so many things in so many different places that they become jack of all trades, master of none. A long time ago, when people were just studying at Improv Olympic, they became great. But now a lot of times I see a team is flailing because some of their people have to do a show over here and they can't come to rehearsal, and they're doing something over here, so they're just kind of not really concentrating on getting good on one team.
But it was part of my path, honestly, was the full immersion of just doing it too much, seeing so many shows and saying yes to everything, trying to get every coach that I've never had, go to every class that I could, being on any team that asked me, and I did that for years. And so that was definitely part of my path, but then I really did have to get intentional about finding balance.
It's so tiresome if all you do is eat, breathe, sleep, game moves for improv. That would kill me. You need a life in order to replicate it, or try on something new. I think people who spend all day long on the sin board and then go and just watch shows, I understand that part of you that just wants to swallow it all up, but I think you need a break to be a human being.
There's a certain part of it that you can't help. After this long, I still basically am thinking about it just about all the time, and doing it all the time, or talk about it all the time. I think the danger.
So you guys gonna adopt a dog or no?
Well, I was just looking at my husband. We were trying to decide with our eyeballs.
Yeah, I know. You guys are really big on the nonverbals, huh?
We are working on a new form of communication.
Right now, he just put his hands in front of his balls like a soccer kick. That means we don't like that puppy.
All of the puppies are up for adoption. I'll give you guys a little bit of time.
Margaret, I must remind you to not reveal all our secrets.
I'm sorry, we were working on the act, that's for sure. That means I'm tolerating you. I tolerate you too.
Yes.
I'm double tolerating you because I have two hands.
Don't mention my hand.
Darling, there are puppies here. We're going to have to choose one.
Well, this one's lame.
As in
Totally lame.
A good player, to me, a good improvisational actor, is someone who will make a choice right away, so as to let you know where their position is in a scene.
And sometimes, especially with newer improvisers, they think like, well, that's what I would normally do. That's not good enough for a scene. Yeah, I got to come up with something funny that this person would do. But for whatever reason, audiences seem to find like the recreation of reality pretty humorous.
I think sometimes the problem in improv is people try to be funny. So that means if your gig is about trying to be funny, then it's going to ultimately be difficult to watch someone try to be funny. I think people have to trust more that comedy is there. I think that's more of a struggle for me, thinking, oh fuck, I'm doing comedy, therefore I'm responsible to say funny things. So if you say something funny and you want to heighten it, then you got to say something funnier. That's a rough racket.
And it's more important to find your own voice and be who you are. You know, don't try to be a wannabe because nobody wants to see a wannabe.
When we imitate our heroes, when I first started classes here, Amy, Rachael, and Tina were in classes, and I stalked them at their shows. I went to see everything they did, and if they were good at something, I brought it back to class with me. Until it became Rachael, not Rachael being the poor man's Tina Fey. I think that you need to be inspired by your heroes. I think we need to have them, but nobody should want to be Chris Farley or Janine Garofalo. You should want to be the best performer you are.
The people who come here saying I want to be a star are so focused on being a star that they're not listening in class, and they're trying so hard, and they're trying to be funny, and they're doing pratfalls, and they're just like being joking, and they're not making it because they're just too busy worrying about the end instead of the product.
A good player is willing to take a risk, is willing to make a move even if they're not going to get a laugh if it sets up somebody else. But they can also get a laugh. You know, they can serve and they can volley.
A good player's not afraid to be a victim or the CEO. You know, good player's versatile.
They're up on their current events. They're up on philosophy and poetry and music and pop culture. I think, quite honestly, nerds make good improvisers.
What makes performers good is that they're intelligent, they have a high reference level, but they can do level work. They're not hitting it over the head. They're really saying something through the work.
Then you have lots of gut improv players, like utility players.
You're a person who's a real good grounded person. This person's good at getting the scenes going.
I think a good team is comprised of a head player, a heart player, and an X card.
The wild hair, you know, he brings an energy to the piece.
So you have at least two of those to make a really good team.
You know, you try and sort of round everything off. I mean, to concentrate on one thing, you're sort of doing yourself an injustice, and if you pigeonhole yourself, I think that's going to be that'll just end up hurting you. But you can't. At the same time, you can't shy away from the strengths. So, like, I would probably say I'm definitely a character actor. I'm the guy that'll say and do weird things.
What's up, Hercules? What you doing?
Nothing, and I'm not named Hercules.
Hey, Hercules! Man, you opening that jar?
My name is Ray. Quit it.
Wow! Wow! Yeah!
A good player isn't worried about looking stupid because the worst thing that will happen if you look stupid is you might make comedy. So, fuck you. You know what I mean?
A good player is someone who acknowledges your initiation if they're going to respond.
Someone who like really sticks to like the fundamentals, like yes anding and shit. Like it sounds so stupid, but that's so important.
Yes and is the fundamental principle of improv work. Without yes and, improv doesn't happen. Without yes and, it's stand up. If you come in and say, Grandma, I love you, I would not say, I'm not your grandmother, I'm the milkman. That would get a laugh, but I just effectively crapped on your scene. So yes and is yes. Yes, I love you, Timmy, and I baked you cookies because you won the spelling bee. So there I go. I validated the fact that I'm grandma, I yes my partner, and I added some information by saying this kid won the spelling bee. So there we have a little nugget of a scene that is largely created by yes and.
I don't really use the words yes and very much. When I train corporately, sometimes I use those words because it's a good tool to use. But I've never gotten any power as an improviser out of thinking about yes and or thinking about that concept. To me, I noticed that it stirs people more toward a happy, good time improv scene. This ice cream cone is great. Yes, and I want another one. Yes, and let's go to the park. Yes, and let's fuck ourselves. Because it's just so fucking boring after a while. It never gave me any power to merely agree and then add something to it.
You know, you can become a good improviser just playing yes and, but to become great, you have to understand that literally yes anding is not really what yes anding is about.
At its most simple, it's the thing that allows a bunch of disparate and baroque minds to get onto an empty stage together and agree to the same reality at its simplest level. And that's what makes the audience start to share our reality with us to some degree.
Sometimes go screw yourself. No, go screw yourself is a real good yes and. Because you just said, why don't you put your hand in this boiling hot water? All right, well, if I agree that this water is boiling and you just asked me to do that, no, go screw yourself is agreement. I'm saying this is what is actually happening and here's how I would react if someone told me to do that. So it's that all the things that we say are taking place are really taking place.
Would you like some of my tuna fish?
No. Hell no.
I have fruit punch Capri Sun.
I'll take a little. Stuff's great.
And then a good player is someone who's constantly, not only knows what their thing is in the scene, but is constantly surprising the audience and his or her partner all along the way. Just surprising from within whatever context they create.
Already how you lived your life equips you just fine to be able to do this work. All the thoughts you've had are all cool enough, the things you've learned are all valid enough, the things you felt are all strong enough for you to already be good at this.
It's not. We like hiring people. We like people. Personality is second to none. Your personality.
I appreciate your relaxed attitude, not the last one.
Oh gosh.
Some of the Tina and some of the, I think producers, some of the other producers and writers came to Chicago and they were looking to fill the spot that was being opened up by Will Ferrell leaving.
Lauren Michaels will come into town every once in a while and see the main stage show. Last year he came here.
Well, how it worked in this case is there was a showcase of different shows, different casts. And you did your thing. You had 20, 25 minutes, I think, per group. And you come in with a writing sample and your headshots, multiple headshots, multiple writing samples. And you give it this little envelope and you fill out this waiver, because it's usually recorded. And you turn it into Charna, whoever is designated as the person, and you just wait. You wait. And they'll contact your agent if you have an agent, or they'll contact the theater, they'll contact you directly. And say, Lauren, really like what you did, and they fly you out. They flew out a couple of friends of mine, 3 friends of mine.
Yeah, they had 3 guys from LA, 3 guys from Chicago, 3 guys from New York.
You have to do 3 original characters and 3 impressions. Saturday Night Live, if they like you and call you back, then you have to do a stand-up set in New York City in front of a stand-up crowd, which is intense.
So then we did the New York audition, and we had a good time. And I was invited at that point to do a final audition, which was going to be, you had to do like 3 or 4 characters and 3 or 4 impressions within 5 minutes on the monologist spot that you see on television when the guest host comes out. And I told her I couldn't do that. And so there was no way, like the thought of doing SNL made my legs start shaking.
They sent me to New York in 1991 with 8 other women from around the country. That was around the time 2 of my best friends at the time were hired, Betty Cahill and Melanie Hutzel.
The period after you come back from New York to when you get that phone call, yes or no, it was fucking traumatic for these people. These people were, you couldn't sleep. One guy was all pale, you know, the other guy was just absent-minded, just they were just concerned, you know, preoccupied with this shit.
Unfortunately, they were looking for men. They did pull 2 men away.
I did in Way's audition, but balked out of the final audition.
I felt crappy, but I also felt good that I was given the opportunity, that somebody thought that I might be appropriate to that, because I grew up when SNL was king, as opposed to this venerated, institution. So I was amazed that I could get there.
Will you calm down? Chill out! Chill out! What?
17 hours later.
So if that is the definition of improvisation, where is the future of people making up things on stage going? It's going to remain people making up things on stage by definition. Its forms will change. Maybe it'll go into different media, television, film, etc. But improv as a concept is just improvisation.
That night, I saved up $5,000 in a period of 5 months, because all I was doing was working. And then I moved to Chicago with 2 duffel bags full of clothes, and that's all I had.
All the cars and traffic lights spin around my head at night. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by you.
When I moved up here, I just knew I wanted to do something along the lines of Second City. And as I started taking classes, that's kind of what I figured it was. It was just a rung on the ladder that I needed to climb.
Improv has never asked me to be like more curvy or sexy or anything. It's asked me to be me.
Sometimes I get overwhelmed by you. Go to work and get pissed off. Make a pound and stress it off. Sometimes I get overwhelmed by you. Whoa, don't you ever just wanna tell us the truth?
life circumstances have kept me here. And as interestingly enough, Stephanie Ware has a quote on the wall of Second City that, in the bathroom that says, "Bloom where you're planted." And I have been planted here, so I will bloom.